Hi, today's session is going to talk about fruit tree selection. Every year I get question after question about what is the best apple tree to grow or other types of fruit trees to grow in our neighborhood. And number one, the first question we need to be reminded is, do we know what zone hardiness we're in? We in North Dakota are in zone 3, which is more us. Zone 4 can be more us depending on your type of yard and depending on even if you got real climatic conditions in your yard up here, maybe we could get by with an early zone 5, but zone 3, zone 4 for us is what we need to look for and find that tree that would have that zone kind of hardiness with it. Of course, when we look at varieties, we see stuff that's put together from Manitoba, from Minnesota, and North Dakota. Keep in mind that those are more to meet the requirements of our long, harsh winters. So when you're looking at apple trees especially, consider looking for them. Secondly, when we plant a tree, you have choices. You can do one that's already been potted, or you can buy bare root. There's differences in both. Most of them started off in the pot as a bare root and then put in a pot to kind of keep them growing should they not get sold or taken care of for a period of time. Bare root trees come just like as you hear. They come bare root and you need to be after them to take care of them. They need to be kept in a cool, dark place, damp place, so them roots don't dry out. But I personally would rather plant a bare root tree than I would a potted tree. One more thing before we get into the different apple tree varieties that are available for us for up here. When we plant our trees, one of the things we really need to remember is we need to make sure that our roots are all kind of scattered apart. Oftentimes I'll see trees that aren't doing so good, and trees are very symptomatic. If they're not doing so good on one side of the tree, typically it's because the roots on that side are showing some failure of some sort. Many times when we plant a potted tree, those roots are kind of gnarled up and they'll go in that way. And they could end up all the roots being on one side of the tree, and it creates a problem for nutrition. It also creates a problem for anchoring the tree down. So when you plant your tree, even if it's in a pot, open that up, kind of move the branches around in the bottom, the roots around on the bottom of the trunk so they're all kind of pointed in different directions, and then plant your tree and dig a hole twice the size of that root mass that you have, and you'll get along just fine. So talking about different varieties that grow well here, and of course we have some of the more common ones like the Harrelson, which is a really hardy tree for here. Most people have a Harrelson if they have apple trees. It's been a mainstay for our area forever and ever and ever. If we look at some of those, and that's used a lot for baking pies and or canning apples. But if we look at the list and go through the list, you'll see that there's many apples that do quite well here and are actually quite tasty. I'm going to talk more about maybe the varieties of apples that I have grown, and I do have right now in my yard, but they're all on the list of different trees that we can plant. The number one I'm going to start a Honeycrisp. Everybody knows what a Honeycrisp apple is. You know, they do have really good apples. I have not been so successful growing a Honeycrisp apple in my yard. It succumbs to fire blight rather quickly. You can usually get 3 to 4 years out of them. Don't get me wrong, there's other areas that can get by just fine with them. But in my own particular yard, a Honeycrisp has not been a good choice. So if I want a Honeycrisp apple, rather than grow one for the third time, I just go to the store or find a neighbor friend that has had better luck growing them than me. Another one that's very similar to that, and in fact is Honeycrisp, and that's one called Zestar. Very good apple. Grows rigorously throughout, sometimes unevenly, but the apple's the same size and does quite well up here. So if we go through the list some more, another one that I have, and it's a very good eating apple, and that's called Goodland. That was actually developed in Manitoba. It's got more of a yellowish color when it's ripe and does really well. It's got a really nice shape to the tree, and fire blight wise has been really good about not getting any presence of the fire blight. that I have, and it's on the list to plant in North Dakota, and that's a Woodars. That was developed by the Woodars family at Winemere along with NDSU. Apples are a little more yellowish with just a very light tinge red to them. A little bit later maturing apple, but very, very, very good apple. Good eating, and the tree is rigless, more of a round shaped kind of tree. Then if we keep going down the list of other that I have, I got one called Snow Sweet. That's another really bright white flesh apple. Really good for snacks. When you cut it open, it doesn't brown up as fast as a lot of the other trees. Good growing tree. Another one that I'm quite pleased with. Then I also have one called Crisp, and that is also an offshoot of Honeycrisp. And that apple tree is actually quite different. It grows really nice and patterned for an apple tree. It can sustain some heavier loads of apples, but the apples are just a little bit smaller. Absolutely excellent for eating, but again, just a little bit smaller than those other apples that I talked about. When I talk about eating, I myself prefer not to have such a big an apple. That way I don't get tired of eating it. I can always grab another if there's then I can't. Another one I have in my backyard is a chestnut crab. We cannot forget about a chestnut crab if we're thinking about apples in our yard. Some might say a crab, oh no, we don't want a crab, but a chestnut crab very oftentimes will be about the size of a silver dollar, and they are excellent, excellent apples to eat. I would guarantee that if I put 10 in a pail and I give you one, you'd reluctantly try one, and after you ate the first one, you would be grabbing for another one. That's just how good a little apple they are. Oftentimes back in the days, they were called the Lunchbox Apple because in a lunchbox for the kids when they went to school. So they're just some of the highlights of some of the apples that are available for growing up here. And of course there's others as well. There's a Sweet 16 that people have had really good luck with. There's also Prairie Magic, Dutchess, an Estate Fair that also have done quite well, and a Dakota Gold that's also was a North Dakota variety. So just some varieties to think about if you're going to be planting some apple trees next spring. I get every year tons and tons of questions of which apple tree should I plant for our area.